Tech Sideline is presented by First Bank and Trust Company, a nationally ranked community-focused bank with over 30 locations throughout Virginia, Northeast Tennessee, and North Carolina. Who you choose to bank with can make all the difference. Visit firstbank.com to learn more. What a thriller from Hard Rock Stadium that resulted in maybe one of the most controversial calls in Virginia Tech sports history that will certainly haunt Hokie fans maybe till the end of time. It's episode 379 of the Tech Sideline podcast. We're unpacking Virginia Tech in Miami. We got the whole football crew on set, and it starts right now. We reconvene on a Monday, September 30th, 2024 from our high-tech studios in the Virginia Tech Corporate Research Center. Remember to like, subscribe, refer the show to a friend, and head over to techsideline.com to check out our extensive editorial content. Subscriptions are just $12 a month for loads of content, and for Virginia Tech students, your subscription is free. Tech Sideline is presented by First Bank and Trust Company, and the Tech Sideline podcast is also brought to you by StubHub. Can't find tickets or parking for the game? Try StubHub, the destination for ticket buyers and resellers. Every order is 100% guaranteed on StubHub. StubHub's exclusive Fan Protect guarantee ensures valid tickets or your money back. Tech Sideline is a StubHub affiliate, so every time that you click on your link to make your purchase, we get commission from that. So with that, go get your safe, reliable tickets and check out StubHub today. I'm your host, Giovanni Heater. To my right, Chris Coleman, our lead analyst and columnist. Across the way, Andy Bitter, our senior staff writer. And in the fourth chair, the managing editor, David Cunningham. Nick Brown, the mustache man, producing the show behind the scenes. Well, guys, we have to start. We know where we have to start. Your immediate reactions, where were you when this play was made? Chris, where'd you watch the game? Of course, we were all down in Miami Gardens as well.
I watched the first half at Sharky's and I watched the second half at Champs. Maybe I should have stayed at Sharky's. I don't know. But immediate reaction was I thought it was a very difficult call to overturn. I knew exactly what the reaction was going to be from the fan base. It's a difficult pill to swallow. My overall thoughts on the game was that's the best game Virginia Tech has played in the Brent Pry era, all 29 games, when you consider the level of competition, without question. So from that standpoint, it's unfortunate that they lost it, and it's unfortunate that it happened under that set of circumstances.
That was in our corner of the end zone. Miami has a weird, they used to be where the Marlins played, so it's like a baseball press box where it was. So it's in the corner like that, and that pass was coming down in our direction. So everything happened right in front of us. I mean, not right in front of us. The refs obviously had a better view of it and still probably couldn't figure out exactly what happened on that play. But we had a pretty good vantage down there in the corner and just sort of the chaos that ensued after that. And I mean, the play happens, the ball pops out, they start flashing the lights. I mean, you talk about the LED lights, they're flashing the lights and the celebration is going on. The referees are standing over the play, still discussing it as Miami's players are coming on the field celebrating. And then they rule the touchdown. And like I tweeted touchdown in all caps and people are like, what? Like I imagine if you're watching on TV, you're just seeing the final score and Miami celebrating, the lights are flashing, you have no idea. So, I mean, it was just total chaos when that is happening. And then what felt like the longest review in history, maybe? I don't know.
It's not the longest, it's one
from
of
the
them.
time that the play happened until the time that they announced the overturn of the call was 7 minutes. I looked at my timestamps on Twitter, and like that is an eternity. like the song Layla is 7 minutes long. Like think about that. It's like, okay, the catch, and then go listen to the entirety of Layla and then come back. We'll tell you how the game ends. Yeah, like that's how bizarre that was. The most difficult and sort of maddening deadline story I've ever had to write, because the entire crux of the story changes based on what that call is. So you can't really write ahead of anything at that point. So it was nuts. Crazy finish.
David, you were sitting right towards Andy in the press box.
Yeah. God, I mean, we were sitting in the press box trying to figure out what in the world was going on. I mean, just an amazing game overall. I think.
Unbelievable game.
Crazy finish, but the game delivered. that's I can't believe that the ACC for some reason a couple years ago thought Virginia Tech and Miami shouldn't play every year, because I mean this is a kind of game that's like, oh my gosh, like if both of these teams can get back to prominence, and obviously Miami's kind of doing its part, but you're gonna have some really, really great games. I mean, just fantastic from start to finish. Like you, Chris, I thought, I mean, this was one of the best games I think Virginia Tech has played, maybe under Brent Pry, period. Miami is the real deal, though, and kind of showed why for a lot of stretches. Cam Ward made some unbelievable plays. Kyron Drones and Virginia Tech made some unbelievable plays. I mean, as a neutral party viewer, I'm sure you were thrilled watching this game, and then it comes down to the end. I think Virginia Tech probably should have won it multiple times, and I'm sure we'll talk about that. That's kind of what I wrote about after the game, that the final play kind of overshadows probably some of the mistakes that Tech made. But coming down to the wire, I kind of feel a little bit for some of the Tech players, like Daquan Felton. Fontel Mines was kind of had his arm around him walking off the field after the game. I mean, talking to the guys, talking to Kyron Drones, kicker John Love, Bashal Tootin, the running back, after the game, they're just kind of like, man, the roller coaster of emotions there. Like, to go from thinking you've lost to thinking you've won to thinking you've lost, like, you can't really describe it. So just a crazy game all around, and it was very fun to be there in the stadium. I'm sure, Gio, your vantage point, I mean, calling the game, I don't know what the heck you guys did for 7 minutes waiting for that review, but
we talked about it and just broke down what we were seeing. Definitely the most fun I've had calling a game. So and it felt good right from the get go. Sometimes when the energy's high and everything, and you get into what they call the flow state. I think we got into a flow right off the bat, and we felt like we were gonna have a good show. So the game delivered, and that always helps with that. Chris, what was the scene like downtown for that?
Well, it was so packed at Sharky's that like you couldn't walk from one end of the bar to the other. So that's the main reason I left Sharky's, and I went to Champs, and I actually went to downstairs Champs because upstairs Champs was so totally packed, and there was hardly anybody downstairs. So it wasn't that dramatic because I chose a point where I could watch the game more quietly, so I could process it better.
Sure.
And I wasn't getting elbowed in the head every other second.
I'm sure everybody took the overturn maturely.
Oh, absolutely. No question. They were all like, yeah, you know what? That's a fair result. Yeah, yes, absolutely.
I trust these ACC officials that they got it right.
Chris, very important question. Your opinion of the Sharky's renovations?
I actually sat at the bar, but I think it's pretty cool. They still haven't quite opened upstairs. They told me it's probably another week or so on that. Bad thing is they're still like, the seating is greatly increased. The capacity is greatly increased. There's still one bathroom. They spent thousands and thousands of dollars on that renovation, and it's still the same hand warmer that was there when I was in school that barely even functions, right, to dry your hands. So maybe they should fix that part of it. At least get a new hand warmer in there.
So nobody fully answered the question. Was it a catch is what I want to know.
Right.
And with the ruling on the field being a touchdown, how can you possibly overturn it?
All fair questions. Tristan Raish wrote a special edition of Ask the Back Judge last night. I agree with his take. I actually don't think he caught it. I don't know that for a fact. I don't think he did. What leads me? I think he got possession up here. I do think that, but by rule you have to come down with it.
Sure.
And I think he lost possession on the way down, is my gut feel. And part of the reason I say that is because of the reaction. Like, he just laid there dejected, right? And this was before they made any call. It was like most guys, like when you see a football player, when he thinks he's made a play, he starts celebrating, or at least he starts pleading his case to the ref. Like you see defensive backs, like they get called for pass interference and they're doing that number, and then they turn their back and realize they get called for pass interference. He laid there like he thought the game was over. And I think if he legitimately thought he caught it, he would have been up celebrating or at least talking to the ref. Now, don't anybody misinterpret that and say, oh, Chris Coleman said the refs got it right. They shouldn't have overturned the call, in my opinion, because I don't think there was enough evidence to overturn the call. So I'm a little bit frustrated because I feel like they actually did get it right from the standpoint of I don't think he caught it, but at the same time, by rules, I don't think you can overturn that. I think if you put the shoe on the other, I feel like if they'd ruled it incomplete and then the replay had said, oh, it was a catch, I would have felt fortunate. But I think if it was ruled incomplete, they wouldn't have been able to reverse it. But I just don't think there's enough evidence in there to do anything. So the call's got to stand. That's my overall takeaway.
I'm in the same spot as you. What do you think, Andy?
You'll hear Danny Cole brought up a lot with this because a lot of similarities with that. That was a catch. That was pretty clearly a catch.
Danny Cole, you're saying?
Yes. This one, I'm not so sure. And I think that, leads into the entire discussion about it. Frankly, I'm shocked they called it a touchdown on the field. I am. But they did. At that point, they did. And that goes to replay. And it's irrefutable evidence, right? That is the standard on replay. And once it gets to that point, we're talking about it now. It's like, I think he didn't catch it. Maybe he did catch it. The College Game Day was split on the dais there and what they thought. That might be a TV thing where they're like, okay, one side say yes, one side say no, so we get some contrast here. You look at Twitter and take out all, a bunch of Hokies fans follow me, so I know where they stand on this. A lot of Miami fans are chiming in. I know where they, if you have the you in your Twitter handle, you probably are going to be on one side with this. I say this as somebody who has VT in mind, even though that doesn't mean I'm a VT fan necessarily. If you take all that out, I see a fairly split decision. Now, it might not be 50-50, but it's still a split decision. If that's the case after the fact, and we're still talking about that, how is that irrefutable evidence? How is that 100% certainty? And I think that's the point Tristan made in his article. Is like, the replay was designed to be like egregious, obvious mistakes. That like his knee was down 2 yards short of the first down or the goal line or whatever it was, or he dropped the ball and did not catch it. And okay, that's a mistake. They overturned it. Now they are just dissecting this film like it's the Zapruder film or something like that. It's like, the ball is back into the left here. Like they're trying to come to a conclusion on plays where I don't think there's a conclusion to it. And, they have the one angle where it's like, well, the ball's kind of moving around. It's like, well, you can secure a ball and it's still moving. Like if I have the ball like this and it's moving, it's still moving. So did he secure it? I don't know that he did, but I don't know if there's a camera angle that definitively tells you that he didn't. And if that's the case, and they're still like, well, we're going with our best guess on what it was and saying that it wasn't a catch, I think that's not following the replay rules there. People are like, oh, well, if you didn't think it was a catch originally, it was like, are you going to follow the process that's set out on how this thing is? They called it a catch on the field. At that point, that's the standard to overturn that. You have to assume that call is correct. And then you have to find something irrefutable to change that. And I don't think they did that.
I agree. It's like they're using... Like in the U.S. court system, a criminal trial, you have to prove it beyond reasonable doubt, right? It's like they're using that as opposed to definitive evidence, right?
We need the gong from Law and Order there.
Exactly.
You said in the criminal system there.
Exactly. Right.
Don't sue us over that, Law and Order. I know they get pretty litigious about that sound. Yeah, I mean, that's the interesting part is it's just like a lot of people are like, they should have the ability to just kind of throw their hands up and say, let's go to replay and look at it. It's like, well, that's not the process of what it's like. And now I know Miami fans can be like, if you're arguing the process, then you know it wasn't a catch. It's like, I don't know whether it was a catch, but they ruled it a catch. And then after that, they said definitively that it wasn't. I don't think they have the video, the clear shot that tells you that it wasn't. I think if you're a Virginia Tech fan, this is especially stinging because this is twice now.
Right.
They've had game-winning catches in big games overturned. Like, is there another program in the country that has two of those on their historical resume?
And the NCAA even rewrote the catch rule after the Danny Cole thing.
Like, why is this standard of like conclusive evidence like that applies to everybody else except for in the case of Virginia Tech? Like, I know that's not what it is, but it just feels like in the case of Virginia Tech, when they catch a game-winning touchdown at the end, like you can just sort of change it if you think it wasn't a catch. Like that's got to just drive Hokies fans nuts. I understand where they're coming from on that.
All right, I'll bite, and we'll go down this rabbit hole momentarily because there's conspiracy theory flying around about this. You have an undefeated Miami team, the lone, not undefeated in ACC play, but the lone, like, looks like they could be a national championship contending, at least college football playoff contending team in the conference. Florida State is disappointed. You saw what Georgia did to Clemson. Like, if you have a chance to have your prized possession of the conference, it's probably Miami right now. it's the same official that did the Miami Duke game, and you had the laterals and whatnot on the kick return. Like, there's so many conspiracies swirling. Was there an effort, in your opinion, to protect your prized possession?
I think that's a conspiracy theory. I don't really buy that. I might buy incompetence. But in the end, it was the replay official, not the on-field official. And yes, that was the crew that got suspended from the Duke-Miami game, but that was the crew that gave Tech the touchdown.
True.
Right?
And then they sent it to Charlotte.
And they missed 2 number 17s on the field for Virginia Tech. So,
it's Occam's razor.
Right.
You know, like the simplest explanation is it's like, do you think like Jim Phillips has put on this like great front all the time, but he's actually this Mr. McMahon type figure, like pulling the strings of the ACC, and like we've got to get like Miami is our surest bet because they've been such the consistently great program over the years. We got to make sure that they're 5-0 on this. Send the calls down, or is it just that these officials aren't that great? They showed it throughout the game that they aren't that great. I mean, even on that final drive that they missed the horse collar on it. Kind of looked like Aiden Green got interfered with on that ball in the end zone, if I'm being honest.
I agree.
It was not a big-time game. They had the holding call on Caden Moore that I know Hokies fans get nuts about, and PJ Prelo had the long touchdown drive. They scored on that drive
Luckily,
anyway.
they scored, yeah.
So I don't think that is as big of a factor, although in hindsight, they took a lot more time getting down the field to score that touchdown, so they would have had more time on the other end. Not saying that Virginia Tech would have used that time well, because they didn't use the 2 minutes they had very well getting down the field. But I think the simplest explanation is that refereeing is hard, and the ACC doesn't always have great officials, and they just kind of screw this thing up at the end.
Speaking of Mr. McMahon, I watched the documentary.
I've seen 2 of the episodes of the play. It's pretty good.
So I watched it, and so the Montreal screw job's in my head. I almost named my article.
That's the episode I'm on. I even put screw job in my article.
I almost called my article the Miami screw job just because that was in my head.
You totally should have.
Gosh, well, I wanted to read Tristan's article first.
Yeah.
Get the perspective of an official to see if it matched my own view. In hindsight, I probably should have.
Well, I think, we mentioned before how long the review took. And, if something is irrefutable, it's pretty plain to see right away. If you're sitting there for 5 minutes, 6 minutes, and you're still staring and like, I think this is what's happening here. And like, it's not like they had to figure out afterwards, like, okay, where's the ball spotted? What's the clock at? Like, that was all, they're just figuring out the catch or no catch at this point. And I think if you look at it for that long and you still can't come to a conclusion, how is that irrefutable?
Do you remember the year instant replay was implemented in college?
It's like mid 2000s, something like that.
So like we had HD TV then, but it wasn't like in every household. I still remember watching the 2004 Georgia Tech game downtown in Blacksburg on old tube TVs, right? So not everybody had HD TV back then, and they didn't have this technology back then. So they wrote the rules in such a way that says, look, it has to be irrefutable. And they haven't changed the rules, but now there's new technology, and you can see every blade of grass.
Right.
So
that was like the Matrix, and you're like twisting at 360 and stuff like that.
Exactly. So it's like maybe they should update the rule. If that's how they want to treat it, then fine, update the rules to say that. But if you're not going to update the rules, then you have to follow the rules.
Also, to address something I've seen on Twitter a little bit, a lot of people are like, they had to call it a touchdown, so it went to replay. That's not true. No. That's not true at all.
Right.
That's it's the last play of the game. Everything at the end, everything in college gets reviewed anyway. In the NFL, it'll be last 2 plays, now it's the last 2 minutes, so they would review it anyway. So this was getting reviewed whether they called that a touchdown or an incompletion on the field, and they still came to the conclusion that it was a touchdown. Again, I have no idea how they did that. The ball pops out after a beat. You have to make a split-second decision. Did he actually secure the catch in that 1 second before it popped out? That's the conclusion they had to draw on the field, doing it in a rave as the LED lights are blinking all around them. I mean, that's a tough spot to be in, but that was the call they made. And at that point, I think you got to follow the rules of how it happens, and can you overturn that with irrefutable evidence? And I just didn't see it.
If somehow it slipped through the cracks and there are people that still don't know exactly what the statement from the ACC said and their reasoning as to why they called it incomplete, it was that a defender was lying partially out of bounds when Quan Felton came down with the ball. And they said by him touching Quan Felton, he's effectively making Quan Felton out of bounds, even though Quan is not out of bounds.
Well, I think it makes the ball out of bounds.
Right. Okay, there you go.
It does not make the player out of bounds.
Okay,
it makes the ball out of bounds because the ball is loose and he touches it at that point.
I talked to Tristan about that, and he said that's a legit rule. So if that's their reasoning and that's what they saw, then they got it right. But I still
that has to assume that play is still going at that point,
Right,
and the
right.
catch already hasn't been secured. So,
Right,
I completely agree. Like the ball gets knocked out, the guy is out of bounds, he touches it. If they say the play is still going to that point, then yeah, that's right. They called it a catch before that, and so he comes back to, was it a catch? Did he secure the catch to the ground? And again, that's a tough one to overturn. I just don't know if you see it in the video for sure.
I think to David's point, we can all agree no matter what, this rivalry is back. I mean, you had between the third and the fourth quarter, they're kind of meeting at midfield. You got the tensions flaring, and then you add a spark like this. And one thing that I'm going to ask you guys about later on the podcast, we're going to save it. We're going to wait till after we break down the offense, defense, like we always do. But sometimes you need a spark to ignite a rivalry again, and then this is it. And whether they play again, I mean, we'd love to say, hey, let's play again in Charlotte, right? Brent Pry's going to use that as the motivation. You want a chance at them? Run the table, right? But regardless, when they play next year and the year after, like, you already know what the TV open to the next Virginia Tech Miami game is going to be.
For eternity.
Yeah.
I said it. This is worse than the Michigan one because you don't play Michigan every year, and you're probably never going to play them again. They had the home and home that, went awry when Michigan backed out of that. This is going to be a yearly game. What do you think they're going to show on highlight packages leading into this? I mean, especially in the short term. But I mean, this is one of those, 20, 25 years from now. Look at what we're talking about Danny Cole now. This has been almost 15 years since that happened. I mean, this is going to be talked about for a long time, as painful as it might be for the Hokies.
when Stanford and Cal play, what do they always show? On the lead
Right,
up,
exactly.
Right? When Florida State and Miami play, they always show all the wide rights.
That poor trombone player that gets run over
Every
in the
time.
Stanford Cal game. It's like, God, they're showing that again. I played a great halftime show. Nobody shows that. They just show me getting run over for a touchdown.
Yep.
Where does this stand on the list of wild Virginia Tech games? You had 6 overtimes against North Carolina in Lane. Of course, the Danny Cole game. Like, you have almost an endless list. You had the big Logan Thomas run up the middle against Miami. Like, where is this on that list?
It's right up there. I mean, you might have just named the top 3. You mentioned, I think, about the Nebraska game with the crazy ending, but at the same time, for most of that Nebraska game, nothing happened.
Sure.
A lot of things happened this game from start to finish. A lot of things happened in that UNC game from start to finish. I'm trying to think of some others that might fall into that.
I mean, on the
I'll
road,
say-
West Virginia.
I'll say
with
this
Vic.
is the craziest game I've ever covered.
right.
That includes my time at Auburn, which had some pretty crazy games down there too. I mean, just the back and forth nature of it. It looked like, okay, Miami's going to run, or Virginia Tech scores right away. It's like, all right, we got a game. Then Miami looks like it's going to run away with it. And then Mose Phillips gets the pick, and then Virginia Tech takes a lead, and you're like, how can they blow this? And then you go, oh, right, it's Virginia Tech, and Brett Pry has not made the greatest coaching decisions on the sideline, and they somehow allow Miami to get into it. The crazy 2 plays on Miami's last drive where a guy catches a 4th down pass on his back for the first down.
Unbelievable.
Cam Ward escapes 2 surefire sacks in the backfield to do a chest pass to a tight end who then stiff arms his way down to the 2-yard line and they score a touchdown. Then the ending just takes it up a notch, just throws gasoline on the fire and the whole thing. That was the craziest game start to finish that I think I've ever covered.
Yeah, the ending was just one of the many frustrating things.
Exactly.
And we're going to unpack all that right now. So let's give a brief game recap here. Virginia Tech takes down, Miami takes down Virginia Tech 38-34 at Hard Rock Stadium. Hokies got off to a hot start. Cole Nelson forces the fumble on Miami's opening possession. Tech turned it into points. Kyron Drones finds Benji Gosnell in the end zone. Tech's up 7-0. Miami punches right back. They go 5 plays, 73 yards. Then the next drive, 3 plays, 52 yards. They're up 14-7, 8:19 left in the first quarter. That was the last time that they would lead until they get the go-ahead touchdown with 1:57 left on the clock in the fourth quarter. So you kind of break things down throughout, and I want to ask you guys about the fake field goal. 4th and 3 from the Miami 10-yard line, a chance to go up 13 if you take the points. Virginia Tech had a 27-17 lead at that point with 5:50 left to go in the third. Let's break it down. What do we think? Because I felt like, one, you shouldn't have thrown the ball on 3rd and 3. Right, you're working with Tootin, and Drones is running the ball pretty effectively. Put it in one of their hands, and then if you're going to go for it on 4th and 3, just go for it with your guys that you have out there. Like, I appreciate the trick ration. Everyone says, like, well, if Parker Clements makes the block, that's a touchdown. But it didn't, right? And I feel like it got cute, and if you were going to go for it, stick to your guns. But on 3rd and 3, don't pass the ball.
I think if you're determined to score a touchdown there, and you've got a couple of monsters running the football, and Kyron Drones and Byshell Tootin, and they're both having successful games, and you've got 2 tries to get 3 yards, that's probably the more likely course of success if you play the percentage. I don't necessarily have a problem with the fake field goal call. I wouldn't have done it. Personally, I think you take the points there and you continue to put the pressure on them. That being said, if it had worked, we're sitting here praising the Riverboat Gambler today.
I feel like we're playing the results here.
Yeah.
And I wrote afterwards, I didn't mind the call. You scored a touchdown on that drive, and you can argue the play calls before that. And 3rd and 3, do you try to get closer, and then maybe you can just like push Drones across for the first down at that point. You get a touchdown there, you're up 17. 3 scores. I mean, that's 3 scores. They got to get in the end zone twice and then kick a field goal after that. The way that Miami offense had played and the capabilities that they had, I feel like that's a gamble we're taking at that point. And if you do that, that's a really tough lead to blow. And now they blew a lead anyway. But, if you're up 10 and you kick a field goal, you're going from up 2 scores to up 2 scores. So I don't hate the call there. And again, if Clements gets that block on the inside, that play's there. That might score a touchdown. I think that there was open space there for St. Germain to do that. So they had run that in practice. They prepped it. It had worked well at that point. They said they didn't have to call that play. I mean, the option was there. They got the look they wanted, and they called it. And if they executed it right, man, that's a huge play. And you're right. We're talking about it in legendary tones at this point. Brent Pry has got, the balls to go for it there and make this big play. And that's what you want to see out of your coach. And normally you would. And now everybody, because they didn't make it, everybody's like, you always take the 3 points on the road against a ranked team. Like this is some just set in stone or set in cement rule that's out there. Like, no, that this is what you do every single time. No, it varies based on the situation. And, they took a gamble there and it didn't pay off. But, I don't have a problem with the gamble.
Yeah, it's not the fake field goal that bothers me. It's just that I think if you want to score a touchdown, your best option is you've got Tootin and Drones and 2 plays to get 3 yards. That's probably my only complaint. It's not the fake field goal.
I had more nitpicks with other coaching decisions in the game.
And we'll get to it. And we'll get to it. We'll get to it. What you got, David?
Well, that's what I was going to say. I think Virginia Tech fans look at that. Like, of course, you go, oh, man, should have taken the points, free points. But it's everything else, I think, that transpired throughout the entire game. The way Tech managed the clock at the end of the first half, the coaching decisions there, the way Tech managed the clock at the end of the game, the coaching decisions there. Like, yes, I think that's easy because you can look at that and go, oh, man, if we had just kicked the field goal, that would have been 3 points. That's a difference. But I think it makes sense to I see why you go for it there. Like, if you get it, it's a completely different game. Even if you kick a field goal, a 13-point game, still 2 touchdowns, but you put a little bit more pressure on them. But the Tech defense had stopped Miami for a while there. Miami threw an interception on its 4th drive of the game, punted twice, and then kicked the field goal right before half, and then on the drive right before that fake field goal, the way Tech got in that position was Caleb Spencer intercepting a pass and taking it 77 yards. The Tech defense had stopped Miami on like 4 or 5 straight possessions, basically, up to that point, right? So I think it makes sense. You trust your defense in that situation. You say, hey, we're going to get a stop. Unfortunately, Miami turned around and scored touchdowns on its next 3 possessions, right? And I think that offense kind of took off. But in the big picture, there were a lot more things that went wrong in other aspects of the game, I think, other moments that it's like, oh, man, if that doesn't go wrong, like that, in my opinion, it's not the fake field goal that really killed Tech's chances. It was a lot of other things.
Well, remember that in Brent Pry's probably signature win, it sounds weird to say it like that, against Liberty in 2022, believe it or not, that's probably his best win at this point.
The option.
they did a fake field goal, and that spurred them on. And then I forget exactly the situation, the score of that game, but nobody's sitting here afterwards going like, I don't like that call. They should have just straight up kicked the field goal there. They're like, I like the aggressiveness. You're the underdog on the road, and made a big play like that. So again, you take chances like that as a coach, and you take calculated risks, and you see situations that you like, and sometimes it doesn't work out. But I don't necessarily know that means it was the bad call.
Cole Nelson fake punt last year,
right?
And it worked out. You blow out Wake Forest.
Wearing number 17 in that case.
Yeah. One of the things Brent Pry said was, he's like, we did that to win the game. Like, I think if anything, if you're a Virginia Tech fan looking at that, I know it didn't work, but the coaching staff has shown like it will throw trickeration into it, and a lot of times it has worked. I mean, just earlier in the game, they put Colin Schley in, and it ended up being a reverse to Jalen Lane, and it scores a touchdown, right?
Right.
Like, when this staff gambles on trick plays and stuff, it has been pretty good for the most part. So, yeah, I mean, Tech was trying to win the game there. It's a lot of the other things, again, that it's like, oh,
Pry should have come out like Herm Edwards, and you play to win the game. It would have been more dramatic at that point if he said it that way.
So let's take it to the end of the second quarter before the halftime break. Virginia Tech's in a situation where you can bleed the clock all the way down to 2-3 seconds, kick a field goal, take things into the locker room, and instead, for whatever reason, and I'm sure Andy might have a little bit of reasoning because you guys were at the press conference, Coach Pry calls a timeout. You kick the field goal. Essentially, you gift Miami 3 points. You kick the field goal. You give them something around 25 seconds. Then you end up squib kicking it. They almost take it to the house. Shout out to Dante Lovett for the touchdown-saving tackle. Sets them up nicely. They kick a field goal. You basically hand Miami 3 points. At the end, it was the difference. Now, I think a lot of other things play into that, and who knows how the second half goes with the score being different. But that's something you obviously wish you had back and was a mistake.
Yeah, maybe if you don't hand them 3 points. We don't know how the rest of the game would have gone, but maybe if you don't hand them the 3 points there, then it's a 47-yard field goal attempt at the end instead of a Hail Mary. I mean, obviously, games wouldn't have necessarily gone that way, but it's a possibility, and you've got to do everything you can. Drones got sacked, and then Tech immediately called a timeout. And in that situation, at that point in the field, your two options are to either kick a really, really long field goal or let the time run down to 1 second and throw a Hail Mary. Or let Miami use their last timeout if they really want to.
Not a guarantee.
Not a
Mario
guarantee.
Cristobal.
Exactly. But let's say you let the clock run and then you call a timeout with a couple seconds left and then you decide what to do. You don't need to call the timeout to decide what to do with 25 seconds left. You can call that timeout and then decide. So yeah, it just was not good strategic thinking by Virginia Tech. Not in any way, shape, or form. And to make matters worse, they had two players with the same number on the field after a timeout. Like, that's just disorganized stuff.
When will somebody ask the questions? I did ask the question after the game, and Pry basically said I screwed up. That's not the answer you want to hear, and it's probably alarming to Hokies fans that this coach in his third year that's coached nearly 30 games as a head coach is still making basic mistakes like that with time management. That doesn't speak a whole lot to his game management, and other things in the game didn't either. But I mean, this is basic level stuff. And I make the joke all the time, like, anybody that grew up in the Madden generation or the NCAA football generation knows how to use timeouts at the end of the half like that and how to maximize their potential like that. So I don't know if they need to hire some 15-year-old gamer to be on the sideline to tell him how to handle these situations, or if he just needs to calm himself down, because it sounds like he kind of called the timeout just out of emotion. Like, they made the sack, call timeout real quick, and didn't think about it. It's like, you need to be anticipating what you are going to do in that situation. Okay, if we get the first down, are we going to use the timeout then? Are we going to spike it? If we get sacked, do I call the timeout right away? And, you have to be prepared ahead of time, so you're not making those snap decisions and end up screwing up like that. And I mean, the double number thing is incredible. It's incredible. Why is this still a problem? Like, we talked about the first one. It's like, that's a one-off. That will never happen again. And then two on the field at the same time. Like, I don't know what the personnel is supposed to be. Cole Nelson was blocking. I mean, I guess that's perhaps common on field goal teams, but I don't know if he's clearly not the usual guy out there. And actually, this was the first time that I had noticed all season that John Love wasn't wearing the same number from last year. Because wasn't he 80?
Something like that.
7 or 83, or was he? I
paid no attention to his number.
He had a really high number. Something was weird for a kicker. Now he's 17. It's like, okay, well then you have to understand that Cole Nelson can't be on the field at the same time at that point. And they've got an army of staffers, and I think somebody who tweeted it originally, and then I went back and looked at the play and did the screenshot. It's like somebody on the sideline was telling Pry that they had 2 17s on the field.
Really?
At the last second. And I don't think they had any timeouts or didn't have enough time to call a timeout and change that whole thing. And I think after the play, they hustled Cole Nelson off the field really quick. So they saw it at the last second. They couldn't do anything about it. But it's like, how is this happening again? And for Miami fans, they're like, oh, the refs got lucky. They bailed you out. It's like, well, Tech would have punted anyway and probably punted into the end zone. And then you don't go down the field and get a field goal. So it would have been the same score. It would have been a wash at that point. But man, the difference between, I tweeted going in that last drive, I'm like, Cam Ward should not touch the ball again this half. If you do this right, he does not even touch the ball the rest of this half. And they didn't do it right, and they gave him a chance. And the difference between being up 10 points, getting the ball in the second half, versus being up 7 and getting the ball to start the second half, it's enormous. It's an enormous difference, and certainly, like you said, it plays out at the end of the game differently perhaps in the second half, but you can't help but think, man, you only need a field goal at the end if you don't screw up that end of half situation.
And correct me if I'm wrong, you guys, but there were some timeout issues a couple of years ago, right? And
the Old Dominion game was the very first game of his career,
right?
And they let time.
That's first game though. This is game 29.
To take you back to that game, there was the pass interference penalty. I think it was Dorian Strong on Ollie Jennings. Mm-hmm. And because Old Dominion still had the catch, Old Dominion declined the penalty, and the staff did not realize that the clock runs when a penalty is declined.
Right.
So the clock continued to run, and they let like 35 seconds run off the clock before they realized, oh my God, there's only like 30 seconds left, whatnot.
And Pry was asked after the game, right, if anybody helps him with clock management and when to call timeouts, right?
I don't know if it was that game or it was another one.
It was a later game. But yeah, he said, Michael Hazel helps me with that, right? Who's his chief of staff. So he answered that question 2 years ago that he does have someone helping him with timeouts and things
Hazel
like
does too much to be concerned about that.
Correct.
There's other things that he has in his chief of staff role that he is concerned about on the sideline. You need somebody more dedicated to that. I mean, shoot, Hokies fans make fun of Mike London all the time for his timeout management at the end, and they basically hired Tom O'Brien to come in and stand on the sideline as like a Sherpa to usher him along on how to handle this kind of stuff. And it was the running joke for the longest time, like how they handled the timeouts at the end of that. Was it 2012 game at the end?
Yes.
I think when Cody Durnell made the game-winning field goal, and he explained it 3 times. I remember Teal before the ODU game was telling us the story about how he explained it to him 3 times, and by the end of the third one, it's like, this still doesn't make sense. You're still not quite getting this. At least Pry's like, I screwed it up.
Right.
But they need to fix it. They can't keep making mistakes like this because, you go, how are you 1-10 in 1-score games? That's how. Stuff like that makes the difference, and you've got to shore that up, and you've got to be better at it, and give your team a chance to win these tight ones.
And my view on that is like, you shouldn't have to hire someone to call timeouts for your head coach.
You shouldn't, but if you recognize it's a shortcoming, you should.
You should, but at the same time, if it's something that simple that is easily recognizable by even the most novice of football fans, if that's recognized as a screw up, what else are they screwing up that like most of us wouldn't even recognize because we're not football coaches and we're not football experts and things like that. So when you see things like that, and when you see things like 2 numbers on the field, it kind of kills your confidence in other aspects of the program. Like, what else is going wrong behind there that I just don't have the expertise to recognize, right?
Yeah.
Like they're screwing up simple stuff.
Two quick points. Like, off the rip, Kyle and I, now we realized it quickly, but off the rip, just because the nature of watching enough football, we just figured Miami had called the timeout. Like, oh, that makes sense. They want to save a little bit of time, get the ball real quick. And then we were like, why would Virginia Tech call that timeout? So if you watch enough football, you just figure there's no way in heck that Virginia Tech just called that timeout.
And maybe Miami would have called a timeout if Virginia Tech hadn't called a timeout. But then they wouldn't have had their timeout on their last drive.
What was the tweet that EDSBS says like watching this game, man, is just like watching two colorblind people have to like defuse a bomb by clipping the red wire. It's like it was not a battle. Every day should be Saturday on Twitter.
Bum jokes.
Yeah, it was not a Clash of the Titans, this coaching matchup, and I mean, it felt like Pry kind of saved Cristobal from himself before.
Quite possibly.
Yeah, I don't think Cristobal's a great coach all of a sudden. I think he just recruited Cam Ward, and that, covers up a lot of problems within your program. But man, you got to take advantage of a coaching matchup like that, and they didn't.
The other thing that was just like so perplexing, and it's the second time, right, where it's not just that there's a double number. It's a double number with the most important person on the field, because the first time it was Ollie Jennings. He was the punt returner. Everybody should know the guy returning the punt, I should not have the same number as. And then this time it was the kicker for a field goal.
At least on that one, it was the backup punt returner.
This one is the kicker.
This is your potential all-ACC kicker who's been great. I mean, 2 50-yard field goals in that game. He's made like 23 of 24 going back to last year. He's been great. Like, you should know his number every single game.
It would be like if they decided, we want to play Dante Levitt on offense this week, and they didn't realize he was the same number as Kyron
drones. That's right.
Dang, but how do we forget that, right? It's the same thing.
It's pretty right. And like, I tweeted, and some people are like, "Oh, this isn't. You're making a big deal about it." So, like, on its own, it might be like kind of a quirky, like, one-time thing. This is the second time it happened. It was such a big deal in the first one. It cost them 3 points and potentially cost them that game, that you can't come back and make that same mistake, because now it's just like, okay, what are you guys doing there?
It could have done the same thing this time. It's easy to conceive that game, Virginia Tech being up 3 points late in the game. It easily could have happened in that game. And imagine if the refs had made that call and Virginia Tech had lost 3 points, and now granted Miami would have lost 3 points too, I suppose, but it's just one of those things where that shouldn't happen twice in your whole coaching career, much less twice in 5 games.
Crazy. What you got, David?
Well, I think something I didn't think about it till after, but imagine if John Love doesn't make that field goal. Miami takes over at its own 40-yard line.
Yeah. They got it there anyways, though, after the return.
Right. But has the same amount of time and 25 seconds to go, right? That is, if he misses, it's a bad decision. Mm-hmm. It just so happens that he made it. And John Love has been fantastic for Virginia Tech this year. But, I mean, that has to be the last play of the half. And everybody has to know that. Like, if we don't get this third down, like, it has to be like, if we don't get this third down, if the clock is running, we have to take it all the way down to the end and call timeout, unless Miami does something. And the funniest thing was, Gio, like you said, we're sitting in the press box, and Andy turns to me and goes, "Did Tech call that timeout?"
There was no second guessing there. It was first guessing. I mean, right away. Right. And then they made the field goal, and I'm like, well, I guess it's a moot point, because like David said, you great field position if you miss it. But it wasn't, because they gave up the squib kick. And, we haven't talked about the squib kick.
Yes, we have to do that now, don't we?
Yep. Pry's like, they got dangerous returners. I was like, well, why would you even give them a chance to return it at all then? If you've got, Kyle Lowe is, plus 70% plus on touchbacks at this point. And, I'm looking at the stadium wins. Maybe there's some wind in Miami. I didn't think there was in that one. I think you just kick it deep and go. It's at the 25-yard line. You got 20 seconds. Even if you get a pass interference call, which they did, which I thought was still iffy call against Dorian on that one, you're only at the 40-yard line. You've taken 5-6 seconds off the clock. Bad decision compounded by another bad decision there to do the squib kick. And Pry's like, well, if you cover it better, that's a good play. It's like, if you cover it, you take the coverage out of it if you just get the touchback. So I think that's another curious coaching decision, and it bit them there.
I think, it's all, you use your strengths as much as possible, and Kyle Lowe is one of their strengths. He puts the ball out of the end zone more times than not. So the two incidents we've talked about, or 3, I guess, it's a matter of not using your strengths. Like when I say I didn't mind the fake field goal call, but that I felt like they should have used drones and Tootin on back-to-back plays, two chances to gain 3 yards. Your 2 best running threats on offense, and they've got 2 chances to get 3 yards. Instead, you give it to your backup tight end with 1 chance to get 3 yards. And then you don't really use your kickoff specialist. Like he's your kickoff guy for a reason, because he routinely puts it out of the end zone. So to me, it's a situation of not only it's a questionable call, but you're ignoring your strengths. You're not using one of the strengths of your team. And the chances of them returning a kickoff for a touchdown, even if they've got talented returners, it's negligible anyway, right? Like Bishal Tutin's a great kickoff returner, but like he returned 2 last year. Right. It's so unlikely to happen.
Almost did it.
The chances are more likely you get a holding penalty than a return for a touchdown. But to put a period or punctuation on that point, six other kickoffs for Kyle Lowe in that game. 5 were touchbacks.
Right.
Pretty good chance of getting a touchback there.
Yeah. You had your hand up over there, David. What you got?
Well, I was going to say the same thing. He had 5 of his 7 kicks went for touchbacks. And again, you can say the same thing about the fake field goal, right? Like your strength is your kicker. If you, and that's I think its own point, but you just go with your strengths. Yeah. Like Kyle Lowe is going to. I mean, he has one of the best touchback rates in the country. Like use him, and I think again that's not like a one mistake kills all kind of thing. It's like because you took the time out, then you had the opportunity to squib it, and then you messed up that decision as well. And it's like it all compounds together, and then you have the pass interference penalty.
And then think about it like this. Let's say Tech had done everything perfectly at the end of the first half, and they go up
13.
It would have been 27-14.
Right. And then let's say everything had gone. I know it doesn't work this way, but that fake field goal when they were trying to get up 13, well, if they'd already been up 13, maybe you just kick the field goal right there and go up by 16.
Yeah.
So like mistakes compound mistakes.
Yeah. Best case, it would have been 24-14 if they had played that perfectly at the end of the half. And you're right. Then they don't have to fake the kick. Then I have a problem with the fake field goal later.
Right.
If they're doing that, because the field goal makes a 3-score game.
Bad decisions generally lead to more bad decisions.
Well, this has kind of been a podcast because we're already almost to the hour point. So we'll kind of go a little bit at a quicker pace here talking about the offense and the defense. But I thought this was the best the offense has played all season, and I'd argue it's not really that close. 206 yards on the ground as a team, 394 yards of total offense. They averaged 6 yards per play, and they put together 6 plays of 20 or more yards, 15 plays of 10 or more yards. They were kind of doing what they wanted, moving the football.
Yeah, I agree. Tutin, amazing yet again. I thought Drones was better this week. There's a couple balls he would like to have back that were both drops that should have been caught, but they were also bad throws. But overall, I saw some things out there where I thought they made things easier on Drones from a coaching standpoint. So he had a pass to Gosnell with Jay Lane going in motion, and they faked the screen to Lane. Miami bought it, and then they threw it out there in the void to Gosnell. That's a one-read, simple play that doesn't ask your quarterback to do too much. And there's this perception out there that there's a bunch of college quarterbacks that go through the 3-4 reads every time and why can't Drones do that? Honestly, half the NFL quarterbacks can't even do that. It's a rare skill in quarterbacking. And sometimes I think they make things a little more complicated for their quarterback than they need to. And I don't think they did that quite as much in this game. So I think generally speaking, we've had our beef with the coordinators this year, and I think fairly so. But I thought they were good enough on Saturday on both sides of the ball, on Friday.
Yeah, I mean, PFF gave Drones an 81 grade, best of the season. I haven't gone back previous season or last season to see how high that was. I think he played pretty well, and I think there's some throws, like you said, that you want back. You're not going to have a perfect game.
Sure.
Even Cam Ward had some throws, a couple that got picked up that he'd like back. I think that pick, it's behind Aiden Green, and he kind of set it on a tee by tipping it up. Obviously, you want a better pass than that, but you also don't want to just knock it up for the defender to pick it off. Drones had that touchdown pass late, where he escapes pressure, gets out to the right, and then throws it across his body. It's one of those plays. It's like, no. It's like, yes. He does everything you don't want to do. He's off balance, throwing across his body to the middle of the field. Like that is an interception just waiting to happen. But no, it was the right play, and he saw a spot, and he fit it in there, and Green made a great catch on it. Drones gave them a shot on that last one, on the 30-yard pass. Sometimes when you're at the 30-yard line and you're throwing a Hail Mary play like that, you throw too far.
Yeah.
And that was at the back of the end zone, but it was still in the end zone. He gave him a chance to make the play on it. So a pretty good game by him, I thought, and one that he needed, because I think that was, that first 4 games he was not playing as well as he wanted to. And this team cannot achieve what it wants to if he's not playing that well. It gives you hope going forward, that they could make something out of the rest of this season if he's playing like that.
Tootin ends up having quite the game, like Chris was alluding to. 19 carries, 141 yards, had the 55-yard touchdown, broke free middle of the field, and that was cool because it was a 3rd and 1, and he just hit the line. And then as soon as he broke that one tackle, he broke a lot of tackles like he does. He's first in the country in doing so. He was gone. Was 19 carries enough for Tootin? He had 15 the week before, and we said, hey, we'd like to see him get the ball a little bit more.
Yeah, I thought with how the game went, it was fair. Maybe one or two more on the 3rd down.
Sure.
Yeah, on the fake field goal before that. But these days, what was the play breakdown? Does anybody have a box score pulled up?
Are you talking pass to run?
Oh, no, I mean, like, how many plays did Miami run compared to Virginia Tech?
I could tell you in just a sec.
66 to 70. 66 to 70.
So Tech ran more plays?
No, Miami ran 4 more plays. Than Virginia
4
Tech
more plays.
did.
Okay. So 19 on 66 plays. For a running back these days, that's about normal.
He's still dinged up a little bit too.
Yeah.
You're not going to give him 30 carries in the game if his knee can't handle it at that point. You have to consider, you got a game next week, and then you get the rest with the open week. So maybe they're trying to get him to that point without just overloading him to the point that it wears him down for the rest of the season.
Miami turned just 4 more plays into over 100 more yards, though. 508 yards of total offense to Tech's 394, for whatever that's worth.
Well, Virginia Tech's turnovers were critical, the ones they forced, because they were both scoring chances for Miami. And I think Cam Ward is an exceptional quarterback. He made some big-time plays in that game. But, Tech fooled him on that first interception. He just lobbed it up there because of the coverage he read. He thought the guy was going to be so wide open. He just, it was going to be an easy throw, but the coverage fooled him, and Mose picked it off. I don't know exactly what happened on his second interception, whether it fooled him or if it was just a bad decision. But
Dorian almost picked that one, and he tipped it. It hit him in the chest, and then Caleb Spencer came out. And how about that? The former Miami
it looked like Spencer awesome. Just sort of ran out of gas at the end of that long return.
And then Keller missed every block possible.
If you get in the end zone on that play,
no fake field goal.
There's no fake field goal. You don't bog down the red zone. I think Drones had a pass to Gosnell near the goal line right after that. Yeah. That it's like, ugh.
It was so close.
That play's got to be made, and you're right on the doorstep of the end zone. Everything could have changed with that. But I thought overall, though, I thought this team showed a lot of fight, and I think that's what you wanted to see more than anything. If you're a Virginia Tech fan, he's like, how is the rest of the season going to play it out if they're playing like this in the first month of the season? That was finally the Virginia Tech team that everybody thought could be there preseason. Now, they didn't win, but, they were 20-point underdogs, 19.5-point underdogs, whatever it ended up being in this game when it kicked off, and they went toe-to-toe with a team that's in the top 10. Decent chance at this point, I would say, looking at the rest of their schedule, to make the college football playoff. They were right there with that team. So that gives you hope the rest of the season that this team can continue to play like that and do pretty well. But even if the outcome is devastating and takes you down to 2-3 on the season.
As always, I was
going to say, Miami was one of the 3 losses I predicted this year. I thought they would start out 4-0 and then, lose a good game to Miami. If the team that played on Friday night had played against Vanderbilt and Rutgers,
probably 4-0.
That's probably the exact scenario we were looking at. So I feel like the expectations of the fan base were not unrealistic. Well, the expectations of Brent Pry. He said he expected to play for an ACC title, right? I feel like those were fair expectations for this team with what everybody had, with what they had coming back, and just how they looked the other night proved what they're capable of doing. They just have not played good football up until that point, but hopefully that's the kick-on point for them.
Got to get in the ads. As always, Tech Sideline is presented by First Bank and Trust Company. As our presenting sponsor, First Bank and Trust Company's support has been invaluable to TSL, helping us to bring you all the great content across all of our platforms. They offer a variety of checking and savings account options that are sure to meet your banking needs. That includes free checking. So visit firstbank.com to find the account that is right for you. Well, let's take that and kind of wrap up our show here today with, have they found something? It feels as if they have. Now, would have been so awesome if, they find something. Now you're 1-0 in ACC play. Everything's in front of you. But realistically, if you have found something and you can build off of that, now the tough thing is sustaining it week to week and kind of running the table at this point with an 0-1 start. But I think that's got to be the point of emphasis of your Brent Pry to motivate this team. Like, you want them again? Let's go play them in Charlotte.
Yeah, I have mixed feelings. I agree that they played much better, and that gives me some hope. But he's also 1-10 in one-score games, and there's a reason for that. Like, football is not like, I don't automatically expect stuff to reverse to the mean, because we're not flipping coins here. We're not playing roulette. This is a decision-based game where results are based on performances and the decisions people make in games. So things aren't going to start automatically reverting to the mean, and we're not going to automatically run off 5 or 6 straight one-score wins just by the law of averages, right? You're going to have to start making better decisions on a consistent basis. I think this team is ready to turn the corner, but they will have to start making better decisions in game, or they won't. Now, I do think they'll beat Stanford this week. I think Stanford is more like those teams they easily handled last year than they are, Miami and Louisville and NC State and Florida State, especially if their quarterback's out.
Tell that to Syracuse. I'm just saying.
Yeah, well,
Stanford impressed on that Friday night.
They did impress on that Friday night, but how good is Syracuse? Syracuse beat Georgia Tech, so everybody thought Syracuse was good. Georgia Tech beat Florida State, so everybody thought Georgia Tech was good. But that one is looking less and less impressive these days.
We'll find out. I guess Syracuse plays UNLV in Vegas this weekend. Right. UNLV is a top 25 team. Right. Maybe that tells us a little bit more.
And their backup quarterback looked good.
They're back. That team got better by that guy. A lot of people are saying they got better by that guy going NIL and dropping out.
So my whole thing is, and I guess I'll close with this. I'm very much a control what you can control guy. You don't have any control over what call a replay official makes at the end of the game. You don't have any control sometimes if a receiver makes a great play on his back. You don't have any control that Cam Ward is a Heisman Trophy contender. He's going to make plays. You have to control what you can control, and that has to be the message to the team, and that has to be Brent Pry's message to himself. Control what you control. You can't feel so bad for yourself. When you have an opportunity on the field, you have to make it, because when you're in tight football games, ultimately, that's what it's going to come down to. So if this team does a good job of controlling what is within its control, there's not a game on the schedule that isn't winnable. But if they continue to not do that on a consistent basis, then there's not a game on the schedule that isn't losable either. So it kind of sounds like there will be a pretty decent number of close games down the stretch. They're just going to have to get better with their situational awareness and their ability to close those things out.
I think Clemson looks like a different match.
Okay, probably,
the rest of the way. That one, they're actually looking legit at this point. I think it's a really interesting week. How do you respond to a loss like this? You played pretty well. Feel like you got robbed at the end. A lot of teams can just pack it in at that point. You're 2-3. You're already 0-1 in conference play. I know that doesn't eliminate you, but man, the difference between what a win there and what a loss there does in the standings in terms of tiebreakers and just morale. Playing a top 10 team like that, I think that can be deflating. So that's the challenge of this staff this week, is you have to get this team up to travel cross country, play a team that you're favored against, playing a team that's got blown out last week. Did they get blown out the week before that?
They were off the week before.
They were off the
week
before.
2-2.
Okay.
Yeah.
Didn't look good against Clemson. Travel issues and stuff getting down there themselves. But you got to go cross country to play a team that you should beat. Emotionally, maybe still a little, hazy after last week's game. I think it's gonna be a real challenge. It might tell you something about, what this team is capable of the rest of the season, how they respond to that. And I hate using the term "must win" because, if they lose, they're not going to disband the program at that, despite what some fans might prefer at that point. But the difference between being 3-3 at the midway point, which is not great, but you can still see bowl eligibility at the end of the tunnel at that point, and 2-4 when you still have to play Clemson. And it's like, okay, then you don't really have any margin for error there. I think that's an enormous gap between those two things. So they have to come ready to play, and they have to get their heads right for this game.
Would you rather, this was a conversation we had, the 14-hour drive back up here, was would you rather have the bye week now? I'm under the belief that I'd rather you get Stanford. Granted, would you rather have this game in Lane? Sure. You get Stanford, though. You can go punch them in the face, kind of take everything out of this Miami and use that, and then go into your bye week. I don't think the bye week here would be great because I think you'd kind of fizzle out anything that was created momentum-wise, and also the emotion of it kind of trickles away after a week off.
Yeah, it's one of those things where, like, if Virginia Tech loses the game, people are going to be like, oh, Miami beat them twice, right? That's not necessarily true because Virginia Tech has a history of losing close games.
Sure.
I'm inclined to agree with you. I want to go ahead and play. I want to go ahead and play as soon as possible. I want Virginia Tech to play in control, and I want them to play smart, but I also want them to play pissed off. And if they can manage to do those two things, then I think they'll come out of there with a win, especially since, Stanford, good chance they'll be going with a backup quarterback.
Yeah, I think I'd feel better about that stance if they didn't have to fly cross country.
Yep.
And this is, the first time they've had to do that for football on a weekly basis like this. I mean, first West Coast ACC game that's being played before the Cal-Miami game at night, which, by the way, is game day this week.
Oh, yeah.
Crazy.
So excited.
The memes that they're going to have, the signs the Cal fans should have for that should be great.
Are they going to be there, though? Cal fans?
I would hope they would show up to game day at least.
That's one more off the list. Now the only Power 4 that remain is, can you name them, Andy? Can you name them?
UVA?
UVA, Maryland.
Yep.
I saw the list the other day. I should remember what they are. I'm blanking on the
UVA,
other two.
Maryland, Illinois, Syracuse, and Rutgers.
If Illinois keeps rolling, you never know.
Illinois and Rutgers feel like they could get off that list.
Oh, I know.
At the same time, do they play each other?
Oh,
Well,
actually, I think
only one site gets the game. It's not like they.
Yeah, I know. I see what you mean. Yeah.
Rutgers plays Nebraska this week. I'm going to look it up while you guys chat.
Okay.
So
Anyway,
there's some
continue
ones that can get off that list there. But like I said, traveling across the country, I think, is the challenge of this. Because if you're kind of down in the dumps and you're not prepared for that, it's like add a 5.5 hour flight onto that, and the time change. You're like, where am I? When's this game starting? It's just, I think it's a bad thing. And trust me, you don't want to lose that game and then have to make that flight back. That's going to be a miserable. I listened to Chris Long, the Green Light podcast, whatever it was, and they talk about like the worst flights after NFL games, and like they pick a bad loss, and then you have to make a really long trip like that too. That's not what you want to do if you're this team coming up.
To answer your question, Illinois plays Rutgers November 23rd in Piscataway, and up until then though, like you might think, okay, Rutgers is going to look not the same now, right? They're 5-0, but they're going to lose some.
Yeah.
I don't know. They play Nebraska. They play a banged up Wisconsin, UCLA.
Nah, you can't pick a late November game for that.
Fair.
Yeah.
When you're getting game day for the first time, it's got to be a September or early October thing when the SEC doesn't have a big matchup.
Exactly.
You're treading into rivalry games and meaningful games at the end of the season.
They dodge
no chance.
every bullet.
No chance. I will bet my year's salary that they will not get game day.
They got dominated by Washington. Like 500 and some yards to 299 yards. Somehow won the game.
They won the game?
But they did everything right. They didn't make any like coaching mistakes and things like that. They just did what they needed to do. But they only threw for 115 yards because, let's face it, that quarterback's not very good. Virginia Tech just made him look good. They're a solid team, but they're not game day worthy, in my opinion.
I'll say I think Tech lost to a 9-win Rutgers team because they don't play Ohio State, they don't play Oregon, they don't play Michigan.
So
they
you got
dodge
5
almost
more
every
wins for
bullet.
Do they play Indiana though?
They don't play Indiana.
Oh man, they dodged one there because Indiana's pretty good.
They play Wisconsin, UCLA, USC is the best team. They play Minnesota, Maryland, Michigan State, and Illinois.
Wow, so that actually is the Big Ten as good as people give it credit for, because you play a lot of big. What do they play? 8-game schedule in that league.
Yeah,
and they dodge almost every bullet. There's just not that many bullets in the Big Ten.
Well, it depends how there are some big bullets, but I guess it depends how the schedule plays out.
Yeah,
they got a very, very favorable schedule there.
Well, that settles it. Rutgers is a decent team. I'm glad we got to the bottom of that there at the end of this Tech podcast.
There we go. David, you got anything else? I know you got some stats.
Tech had won its last 23 games when winning the turnover battle by 2 or more. The last loss was Maryland in 2013. Last time Tech won the turnover battle by 2+ and lost.
That's one of 2 games that I've actually covered in the press box.
Wow.
What was the other?
Alabama in 2013.
So you're never covering a game in the press box again, is what you're saying.
0% winning percentage.
People blame me for the downturn of the program. Come on.
These are from Scott Glessner, by the way, who emailed them to Will. Virginia Tech was 95-4 in its last 99 games when it won the turnover battle by 2 or more. 95-4. That is the 7th straight game in the series where Miami outgained Virginia Tech in total yards. That's 9 of the last 10. And it's Miami's 4th 300-yard passer in the last 5 meetings with Tech. So Miami scored 38 points, and Scott said Virginia Tech entered Friday 3-91 all time when allowing 38 points. Would have been 4 had, of course, the catch stood. The wins were the 6 overtime game against Carolina in 2019, the 2015 Tulsa Independence Bowl, and the 1993 Rutgers game. And the last one Scott had was prior to Friday, Virginia Tech was 22-4 since 1987 when scoring on its first possession and forcing a turnover on its opponent's first possession. So, and to kind of wrap it up, it is going to be an interesting week, but that was the best game Virginia Tech has maybe played under Brent Pry, period, all around. I mean, forcing the number of turnovers it forced, I thought some of those guys on that side of the ball made some really big plays. Some big sacks from like a guy like APR. I know the defense kind of got broken or bent, I guess, a little bit late, but it's also one of the best offenses in the country. And the offense, Kyron Jones, rolled out, made some plays. And the only time Tech punted twice in this game. One of those was on that third possession after that grounding penalty. And then the other one was on the second to last offensive possession of the game. So, all in all, Tech moved the ball pretty well against a pretty good Miami team.
What's coming up editorial-wise this week? And if you haven't, go read everything from the weekend because those are some that are, historic at this point, and put them in the archives.
It's unfortunate that Basketball Media Day isn't next week during the bye week, but instead it's this week, so we're doubling up this week.
They can't do it next week because we've got ACC tip-off next week.
That's right.
Crazy that crossover's already here, and it's already October. What is going on?
So we'll have a little bit of basketball stuff. I'll end up writing a basketball column that it won't run till Thursday, till after I'm done with preview stuff and everything like that.
Cool.
Yeah, regular coverage week. We don't know who we're talking to yet, but Brent Pry will be there. I'm curious what he has to say. He said after the game, I hope they got it right. Kind of a loaded statement when he's saying that. I'll be curious to see after seeing the replays as much as he has. I'm sure he has, and hearing from the ACC about stuff. I'm curious to hear if he thinks they got it right. I'm guessing probably not. I'm wondering if he'll actually come out and say that though.
We're going to have a preview pod coming up for you as we talk about Stanford on Thursday. David, you're going to have basketball. Anything else for you?
All the basketball stuff. The thing I'm most interested to ask Pry about, which we did not get to ask him after the game, was about the double numbers. I'm just curious how that happens twice when it's the kicker. But Andy asked him about basically all the other special team stuff. But, it's a normal week for us. Andy and I are flying out on Thursday to go to Stanford with Ivan. Who took some great photos from the game, by the way, that we used. He was in great position for the catch. Basketball Media Day today. We'll talk to Mike Young and a bunch of players. So basketball season is here.
Sounds good. Well, that'll do it for episode 379 of the Tech Sideline podcast. Thank you, as always, to First Bank and Trust Company and today's sponsor in StubHub. For Nick Brown, for David Cunningham, Andy Bitter, Chris Coleman, I'm Giovanni Heater, and we'll see you on Thursday.